Hello guys, my name is Yasinta and you can call me Alivia. I am a student from the Archive and Record Management Study Program. So, in here I will tell about a place that is quite memorable for me. The memorable place I mean is the house of my grandparents. I chose my grandparents' house because as a child I spent more time in this house. I am often in here because when my father and my mother work, I was often left here accompanied by my grandparents. Therefore, my grandparents' house was quite a memorable place for me. My grandparents' house not far from my house, only about 2000 meters away. The shape of my grandparents' house between then and now is very different because it has been demolished and totally changed to become like this. Actually, I also want to show the photos of my old grandparent house, but because I don't have the photos, I cannot show it here. Usually, I come home from Jogja to Pacitan every evening. My mother, and my sister always come here on this house. Apart from visiting my grandfather, in here I also to accompany my sister to play volleyball. Every time I accompany my sister in here, my grandfather always asks me about how my college was going, whether it was smooth or not, and what was the story about me time in Jogja. Because from childhood I was closest to my grandfather. So my grandfather was very caring and very curious about what happening to me all the time. Whenever I was home alone, my grandfather always picked me up to take me to his house because my grandfather did want me to be alone. So then when my grandfather passed away, I feel really miss all the attention he gave me. Every time I have an achievement, my grandfather is the third person I tell after my mother and my father. For the example, when I was accepted at Gadjah Mada University, right at night at the time of the announcement, I immediately called my grandfather to tell the happy news. My grandfather was very happy and grateful that I finally accepted into university. After being rejected many times at several universities. Every time I was rejected, my grandfather always encouraged and reminded me that everyone's fortune had already been arranged. But now everything is different since my grandfather left me forever. Even so, every word and whatever has given me, I will always remember it. Okay guys, so I will show you some apart around my grandparents' house that in my opinion are a memorable place for me. The first place is memorable is the yard of my grandparents' house. I think in this place is memorable because back then when I was a child, almost every day I play here accompanied by my grandparents. Then when I was 6 or 7 years old, my parents bought me a new bicycle and I'm very happy. But because my house is the beside main road, it's impossible for me to learn a bicycle at my house. So finally, I learned to bike in here in the yard of my grandparents' house. I learned bike in here because its yard is large and the road in front of my grandparents' house rarely has vehicles, so it's safer. Every afternoon, I always come here with my mother to visit my grandparents, as well as learn to ride a bicycle. And even then, it's my grandfather who taught me to ride a bicycle. My grandfather taught me from the very beginning until I can ride my bicycle smoothly. In my grandparents' yard, in here, I did not just practice a cycle, but in here, when I was a child, maybe enter kindergarten, I really like a ball bat. Almost every night, I asked to my father and my mother to go to the Pacitan Square, so I can take a ball bat in there. When my father and my mother refused my desire, I always cry and got angry with them. So whenever I get angry with them, I always choose to sleep at my grandparents' house instead of sleeping at my home. Because my uncle did not want I always cry and getting angry, finally my uncle bought me a plastic balls and the balls so that I don't cry and getting angry anymore. Besides that, I can also take a ball bath every day at my grandparents' house. Granted, the people at my grandparents' house really understood what I wanted. And this is yard of my grandparents' house. Okay, the next place is here. This place used to be a fish pond, but now the fish pond has been closed and turned into a garage. I think it's memorable because for the first time I tried to participate in training the fish pond with my uncle. In the fish pond it was definitely slippery, but because I don't be careful, so I slept. Instead of being helped to stand up, my grandparents and my uncle laughed at me because I fell and got shocked. I cannot forget this moment until now. Even though it's very simple, but for me it's quite impressive. Especially now that house is very quiet because my grandparents passed away and my uncle has also moved out from this house. In the past, behind in this wall, there was a empty land, and in the empty land there were several trees. There are papaya trees, mango trees, and other trees. One of the trees I like, there is mango trees, because the mango trees is not very tall and the fruit is sweet. Before this wall is built, I used to go to the empty land to pick the mangoes. Uh, because no one owns the mango trees, in the end, it's the mango trees bear fruits, I always pick it. But since I entered junior high school, I never picked the mango trees in there again. I also don't know whether the trees is still there or not. In addition to picking the mangoes, I used to like to take my rabbit to play in the empty land. But because my rabbit was dead many years ago, I could no longer to play with my rabbit again. And like this, the walls I mean. Is the next place is the garden. In this place, actually, then and now not much different. It just now the garden made wider and there is fairly large a bird cage. Before there was a bird cage, there were a lot of plants, and one of which was my favorite flowers as a child is the asoka flowers. So asoka flowers like this. Back when I was a child, I really liked these flowers, especially when displaying flowers very much. I often soak on the tip of these flowers because when on the tip of these flowers is pulled, the end that is drawn is like a water which is the taste is sweet. Until I was scolded by my grandmother because I often pick these flowers until they ran out. Maybe it could be part of my bad attitude when I was a child. Furthermore, right next to my grandparents' house. Usually in here I like to play cooking using flowers, leaves, stone, and sand with my friends who was live in front of my grandparents' house. Uh, so in here I also have had a pretty funny and unforgettable experience until now. Back when I was in junior high school, when I sat here, I fell backwards because I sat too backwards. The incident happened at a family event in my grandparents' house. So that on the day, many of my brother and my sister in here. I think the pain is fine, But I feel same until now because every time I meet my brother or my sister, I always reminded of that incident. Okay, the next place is here. Around this house are planted a lot of cassava trees. Maybe because I was a little and a bit naughty, I often took cassava leaves in here to make a nickel like this. I don't know why. I think at the time, when I successful to making a nickel from the cassava leaves, I felt very happy because, in my opinion, until now, making a nickel from the cassava leaves is quite difficult. Especially if you are not be careful in making it, the nickel will break and not longer to work. If I were told to make it again, I might not to be successful. Furthermore, the next place which is here, on the road in front of my grandparents' house. In the past, when rain very heavy here, the gutters were always overflowing. So, on the road in front of my grandparents' house were inundated. Maybe it could be a cold flood too, but the flood was just a lake. So if it rains and there is an overflow of water in that stagnates in around my grandparents' house, I really like playing in here. Starting from wearing umbrella or raincoats to getting soaked and being scolded by my mother and my grandparents. When I am playing in the rain, there is an interesting story in here. That is, every time I play during floods and rains, and at the time I wear a long earring, strangely my earring I was missing one. But when I changed to wear a short earring, there was never an incident that my earring was missing one. Even now, I still wonder what happened in my childhood. Maybe I don't notice when my earring had dropped and was missing. It was an unforgettable experience until now, because if I remember it again, seems funny and strange too. Apart from playing in the rain, in this road when I was elementary school, every school holiday, I and my friend who was live in front of my grandparents' house also play badminton, hide and seek, or other out games. In the past, in this area was always crowded with people every afternoon who gathered, whether if just talking with neighbors, riding bicycle, or something else. I feel that the atmosphere now between them it's very different. Maybe because this is one of them of the impact of coronavirus. Around this road, I was once chased by ghosts have my grandparents' neighbors until I cried. Actually, it was my own fault because I disturbed the ghost by stabbing its body with three benches. At the time, the people at my grandparents' house laughed at me, who was crying because of my own behavior. Okay, the next place is right at the back of my grandparents' house, but I cannot tell place directly because several places there have been used for boarding house. In the past, there is beehive over there. As a child, I was curious about the beehive, so I invite my brother to occasionally knock the beehive using a broomstick. Even though my grandparents have repeatedly scolded and remind me. My grandparents say knock the beehive using the broomstick is very dangerous. If the hive is knocked, the bee can angry and kiss whoever knocking the beehive. But because I was a child and full of curiosity, I still did it. Even after knocking the beehive, I always run into house because I afraid the bees is chase me. And the place in there. And for the last place in here, in front of my grandparent garden. In this place, for the last, I took a photo with my grandfather during it last year. Quite a few funny and impressive stories in every corner of this house. Because, as I said before, that my childhood I spent more time at my grandparents' house. Even though my grandparents have passed away, they will always in my heart and in my mind. I really miss my grandparents. Okay guys, thank you for watching my video and listening my story. Keep spirit and stay healthy. See you!